Moving on, our next panelist is an activist, an academic, and a Princess Diana Memorial Awardee for her work in promoting diversity and social cohesion in a multicultural society. She's currently a researcher at Goldsmiths, leading on the race audit, and just finished her role as a research fellow in the Department of Social Sciences at UCL. Completing her PhD at SOAS, her work looks at British Bangladeshi Muslims and their changing identifications and perceptions of dress and language. She's also worked as a research assistant at the Institute of Criminology, University of Cambridge, looking at police and counter-terrorism. Let's welcome Dr. Fatima Rajina, who will be speaking to us on how Islamophobia primarily affects women, how we can recognize it and tackle it. Over to you, Fatima.
First of all, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Firstly, a huge thank you to Strive UK for organising this, and thank you to Lamia, who I can't see right now. Oh, she's just there, who's just been very patient with all the email exchanges we've had. So thank you, Lamia, for your patience with me. And thank you to Shaheen. I know he's not here in this room right now, but he was the one who suggested coming to this and putting this together. So thank you to everyone. So I was supposed to speak about gendered Islamophobia in relation to women, but I decided to make a slight tweak and look at a project I worked on at Cambridge University, where I looked at the PREVENT strategy and Schedule 7, but slightly with a slightly different take from our previous panelist. I'm going to share some interviews that I did with mostly men and how those particular incidents impacted women and how women deal with counterterrorism legislations. Now, before I start, I want to say, I know this panel is about raising the future generation. I guess, I mean, I'm not a mother, so again, I'm not here to tell anyone who is a mother in the audience how you deal with the issues I'm about to discuss, how you go about it. All I can suggest is through the way the mothers in my life are dealing with it. And when I say mothers, I mean, many of you, likely, come from cultures where, you don't just use the term mother for your own mother. Can I make that assumption? I mean, I grew up in a household of 4 generations, and there are multiple women in my family I actually call mum. So it's not just my biological mother who's my mother, if that makes sense. So I have plenty of aunts who, so my mum's sisters, they're my khala, but I call them khala amma, so khala amma. So for me, the idea of raising future generation is about something that's done in the collective. It's done in the collective, it's done with your multiple mothers and fathers and relatives. So yeah, I guess that's a point I wanted to clarify with you. And I think one of the things that I want to start off with is on this project, when we went around, we interviewed people. Of course, the key issue that came up with Islamophobia and how it's particularly gendered for women is through 3 particular elements, and it's known as the triple threat that Muslim women pose. Does anyone want to take a guess what those 3 things would be in relation to women and how they experience Islamophobia? Yeah, so being visible. Okay, so visibility of being Muslim, so Muslim woman. What would be the second thing? Not quite. I mean, that's already linked to her existence anyway, according to certain narratives. But so dress is one of them, so being a visible Muslim woman. Not quite, not language, not education. So being a person of color, being a woman of color, so being of a non-white, essentially. So being a Muslim woman, a woman of color, and then what's the third one? Being a woman, thank you. So Islamophobia, the way Muslim women encounter Islamophobia and experience it is through the triple threat, or what I term the triple threat that Muslim women pose is through their dress of being visibly Muslim, which obviously ruptures and disrupts a lot of people. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Being a woman of color, so you have that second intersection within your identity, and then being a woman. So you're experiencing multiple levels of misogyny, sexism, racism. Everything is entangled in everything as your presence as a Muslim woman. Now, what I want to start off with is methodology. I just want to quickly give you an overview of what we did. So for the methodology, we interviewed over 160 people, mostly men, and mostly Muslim men, but we had a small sample of non-Muslim men also, and mostly Muslim women. So there weren't any non-Muslim women in this data collection. Most of the interviews were held in public spaces. Some of them were held in offices because of, you will see from some of the interviews that I share with you, some of the data that came out and some of the horror stories that came out. And what I'm about to share with you, if you're a big fan of, the Bourne Supremacy, James Bond, those kind of, hype type of films, you would think some of these things I'm about to share with you are from these films. The sort of levels of security, the levels of surveillance, the level of getting random phone calls, at 3 o'clock on your phone. These are real stories of real Muslim men who've encountered these issues I'm going to share with you. So if we can move on to the next page, thank you. Actually, can we move back to the previous one? So what I'll do is I'll read out the quote, because what I find is people end up looking at the PowerPoint and not listening to me, which then doesn't correlate with what I'm trying to share with you, is what I've picked up from my students also. So, okay, so the first interview I want to share with you is of a young Muslim man I interviewed of South Asian origin. And I interviewed him in Stratford International at the train station in a cafe. And it's quite significant I mentioned this to you. So when we entered the cafe, we sat right in the corner, left-hand side of the cafe, and he had his Deadbeats headphones on. So he took them off, he put them around his neck, sat down, and he kept looking around the room. And the cafe was empty. This was around rush hour, so everyone's looking to go home. No one wants, their coffee, tea. So it's just myself and him. And across from my left, right at the far end, we had one woman sat there. And because this interview was so striking, I remember everything vividly, the details of this cafe. So we sat there, and he started speaking to me about these phone calls he started receiving and how he then got pestered by the intelligence services to essentially join and provide intelligence in the Muslim community. And this is what he shares with me. So yeah, I was just in shock, and that is when my life changed from that day. It has never been the same, and it won't be the same. It's not the same. From that day, that's when my life changed. I don't know what this means. I don't know how they operate. I don't know how it works. As far as I'm concerned, I watch a lot of movies, and they just pick me up and throw me in a van or whatever. Even to now, it's been about, that was in 2015. Now it's 2017, and even now I'm always constantly looking around, looking over my shoulder. I don't notice it, but people tell me, even if I'm in a car on a motorway. So even when he's in a car on a motorway, he's looking around to see if someone in the cars next to his car are looking or watching or observing where he is, and who he's with. Then he continues and says, nothing's going to happen, but I'm always looking in the side mirror, and whenever I go home, every single time I go home, because I live in flats, I'm just looking behind my back, getting in. Whenever the lift's about to open, I always just imagine the same people there. It's basically, I've created a bit of paranoia, and after that, I changed my name publicly. So my passport name and everything is still the same, but publicly my Facebook name has changed, my photos were deleted, so I go by a nickname. So when I met him, he gave me his nickname. No one in public knows his real name. He doesn't give people his real name. And what happened to him was, he was a young student in a college where he petitioned against the introduction of the Counter-Terrorism Act in 2015, which is what made it a statutory duty, what was just covered for teachers, nurses, doctors to be able to refer people if they felt there were signs of radicalization. So he put this petition together with a group of other students, and because he was a key person who was sort of organizing the students, someone turned up outside his house. Now, because he was 18, his parents obviously didn't have to be there, and these officers who turned up outside his house, they said, look, we'd like to have a chat with you. So his parents were in the living room, they opened the windows, so they were observing the conversation. And the officers asked him, why are you so keen on not having this? Why were you so keen on doing this petition, on not supporting this act? It is there to protect, Britain. And he pretty much presented similar arguments that it's a racist policy, it's there to target Muslims, it's surveilling Muslims. And he thought that was the end of that conversation, right? He started receiving phone calls at 3 in the morning, randomly, people calling him up, checking up on him, giving him random names like Benjamin or Frank or whatever. He'd be out and about, he'd get random phone calls, again, no number. And then eventually they would ask him, so would you like to join our team to gather intelligence on this particular mosque or this particular area? And he lived in a predominantly Muslim majority area in London. And this got to him to the point of, I mean, he's a grown adult young man, so he wets his bed now because of the paranoia that this has left in him. And he doesn't use his real name, and he's been stopped and searched under Schedule 7 at ports. So under Schedule 7 you get stopped at airports or you get stopped at ports. And he's been stopped at Dover with his dad because they were going over to France to deliver some goods for charity. And they were stopped, they were separated, and you're held for 6 hours under Schedule 7, where you're not, by the way, I want to emphasize this, you're not entitled to remain silent. You're not allowed to remain silent under Schedule 7. So if you're arrested under that, at a port or at an airport, you have to essentially, I mean, it's a form of coercion. You have to participate because you're not allowed to use silence. So him and his father were separated. They were kept for 6 hours. You have to give your fingerprints, your DNA. And they just ask you the same questions, and they're trying to make sure they corroborate the details. So are you saying the same thing that your dad is saying? And is it what the dad is saying matching what the son is saying? So that was the first interview that I wanted to share with you of this young South Asian man who has left him in a state. And even as he's giving me these responses, he's looking over his shoulders. So when I re-listen to the interview on the recorder, he stops a lot. And during those moments when he's stopping, those are the moments when he's looking around, when he's fiddling with his headphones. He kept pulling on his headphones. And even there, I could visibly see his anxiety, his paranoia playing out. So I want to move on to the second interview. Before I do, I wanted to mention with this young South Asian man I interviewed, I met his mum, and bless his mum, may Allah bless his mum. She really, really struggled to see her young, son being treated like this, because that had an impact on his younger siblings, because he's the eldest child. So as a mother, she really struggled seeing that, she felt she could handle it with it happening to her husband, because she felt, he's older, he understands, he's got life experience. So the way this impacted his mother was her just feeling utterly helpless, like, what can I do to support my son? And the way she supports him is, which he shared with me quite openly, is, when I wet my bed, my mum knows I don't have it in me to clear out my bed because of the state I'm in. So his mum is having to, clear up after him. When we talk about these impacts, it's not just a case of someone is, shouting names at you and then you go home and that's it. This is a case of it impacting mentally your family. And the impact it has had on his mother when I met her was pretty severe, because that's one of the worst things I presume for a mother. I have 2 brothers who also get stopped and searched. And yeah, it's hard for mothers. Kudos to you mothers for being as patient as you are with everything your sons go through. So the next slide or data I want to share with you is of a young Muslim man who converted to Islam. So that was the one I just shared with you. If you go to the next one. So this was with a young Irishman who converted to Islam. And what was really interesting about speaking with him is he actually had a beard, because a lot of the Muslim men I interviewed who were not converts actually didn't have beards. So, that's usually the assumption people associate instantly with a Muslim man. He was one of the few Muslim men I interviewed who had the longest beard. But he said to me, look, I'm white, I'm Irish. When I walk down the street, no one will ever assume this beard is because I'm a Muslim. They'll probably think I'm a hipster because, he's a redhead. He's got ginger hair. So he said, people obviously don't think I'm Muslim. So he shared this with me about, again, encountering the state and being questioned. And he was in Syria to learn Arabic. He joined, the name of the institute escapes my mind. In Damascus, there's a famous institute called, I think it was Abu Nur Institute, where people used to go to learn Arabic. So he went there to learn Arabic. This is long before the revolution, long before what's happening now in Syria. So anyway, so he was arrested, and this is what he shared with me. And said, and so what it meant for me in my day-to-day life was waking up in the middle of the night in a panic because I thought the police were at my door again. Constantly being worried about, had I breached anything, had I done anything? I ended up in a really, really bad depression. And this is the one of the few men I interviewed who started crying during the interview. So he starts crying and he says, I'm in a really low place because I became completely isolated from my community. I couldn't tell anyone about it. I couldn't go to the mosque. I couldn't open up about anything, and even my family didn't know that I was on the order. My mother suffered from mental health conditions, and it's hard enough on my mum, me becoming Muslim. And then within 2 years of me becoming a Muslim, to be accused of being a terrorist and not knowing why, I couldn't put her through that, especially with her ongoing condition. So I chose not to tell her about the order. So then I'm having to keep secrets from her. I had to move out of her house, even though I was her primary carer. So he was put on an order, which means he wasn't arrested, he wasn't sentenced, but he was pretty much it's similar to being under house arrest. So he was given a black phone. Does anyone know what a black phone is? Anyone watched any of those thriller films where you're given those phones in your room where you have to report to the police? So he was given one of those black phones where as soon as he came in to let the police, he had to pick up that phone and let the police, which was connected directly to the police station, where he had to report that basically I'm home because he had a curfew on the order. And this obviously impacted him, and it was during this time his mother passed away. And it impacted him severely. And he said to me at the end of this interview, Alhamdulillah, I was married by then, because I believe no one would have married me if they knew the things that the state put me through. So his wife, again, was pretty much raising the kids on her own, because he was being watched in his house, where he was given this black phone and he was on this order. And he actually, the more I tell you about him, maybe some of you will figure out who he is, because he actually took his case to the highest court in Britain and actually won his case. The first time round, he lost because they said to him, we can't access evidence because for national security. So sometimes evidence isn't given to the judge because of national security. And then when his lawyer appealed, that's when they won the case. And he does truly believe it's because he was a white man in that courtroom in front of a white judge that's what helped him win his case. So I think one of the things I want to emphasize here is how race plays a role in how justice is served and who doesn't then receive justice. My third case study, and I'm aware of, conscious of time. Is that the time I'm in? Okay, brilliant, thank you. So the third case study I want to share with you is of a young convert man. He's a black Jamaican young man I interviewed. And his story was quite interesting because he's encountered stop and search. Now, stop and search, the SUS law were there already from the 70s, which was targeting primarily the African Caribbean community by the Metropolitan Police in London. So being stopped and searched wasn't something new for the African Caribbean community. But what became new was those of the African Caribbean men we interviewed who are Muslim, is how their Muslimness then came in. Because when they get stopped and searched, it's not because they're Muslim. Are you following me? Am I making sense? So, for example, with this young man I interviewed, when he said to me in the interview, I know that when I'm being approached by a police officer, it's not because they know I'm Muslim, because of course they don't know I'm Muslim. I have a beard, but I'm being approached because I'm a black man. And it's when they know his name, that's when they know, okay, this is a black Muslim man. Okay? But he shared this particular anecdote with me, which I thought was... that led to him actually being questioned by the police. So he was talking about how, I'll read out the quote first. So he says, so when I'm traveling, I assume that it's always because I'm Muslim, because it happens every single time I go to America or through America. So his passport name, he's changed his Christian name to an Islamic name. And he says, and I discussed it with somebody who worked at one of the desks, and they said, oh, maybe my name is similar to somebody on their list, and I should pay some money to an agency in America, and they can have a look into it. So that's clearly because of my name, because it signifies my Muslimness. I've only actually been stopped and searched on the street once, so that's outside of traveling, and I think that's just because I'm black. So he's able to distinguish where and when he stopped and searched based on which identity that is being used against him. And he shared another anecdote with me where he was wearing a thobe and he went to pick up his mum from the airport. So he was at the arrival lounge waiting for his mum, who was coming back from Jamaica. And it was Eid. He was wearing the thobe and he was, really happy, excited to share Eid with his mum. And two officers approach him at the airport and start asking him questions. And again, he said to me, I'm convinced that time when they asked me those questions, it's because I was Muslim. Not because I'm black, but because I was a visible Muslim and wondering, why am I at the airport on my own? Because, you can't be a Muslim man on your own at the airport, right? So he spoke about that and he drew the distinctions. And again, from so many other interviews, these are just 3 case studies I'm sharing with you from over 160 interviews we collected. And what we found throughout is that the ways these legislations target Muslim men in particular, they become very physically violent. Okay, so they start off with subtle things like phone calls at night, and other times they turn into violence. So the second story I showed of the Irishman, when he missed his curfew once, he woke up in the middle of the night. When he opened his curtain, he found 2 officers outside his house who barged into his house, and they beat him up in his house. And he didn't have access to a phone because he had to do all his phone calls through the black phone that was given to him. So what happens during a lot of these interviews that we had, and when we also interviewed women, is that a lot of these particular legislations, it's the women who encounter it through the men. Because women end up encountering Islamophobia on the streets directly, right? So that's usually done through, women being spat at, women having their hijabs removed, niqabs removed, their bags being searched. I mean, my mum, for example, this was when Fitness First, those big blue navy bags that they used to give. My mum was finished her workout. She was in BHS, which no longer exists, the British Home Store. And the 2 security guards came up to my mum, and they asked her to empty her backpack in the middle of BHS. And my mum doesn't wear hijab in a sense that she doesn't wear it, pinned and stuff. She wears the shalwar kameez with like the dupatta. So she was asked, to empty her backpack, which she did. So with Muslim women, it happens in the everyday. In the everyday, the way, someone might not sit next to you on the tube. Someone might not want to sit next to you on the bus. Someone, coming at you, calling you names, lowering the window, shouting things at you. Whereas a lot of state legislations, their primary target of bodily violence is inflicted upon Muslim men. And that's usually done behind closed doors. And with Muslim women, what's happening with Muslim women is that, in my case, I haven't encountered it because I'm not a visible Muslim woman, so people usually never, I experience racism, but I don't experience Islamophobia. So with Muslim visible women, what a lot of they experience, including women in my family, is that, it's the daily violence of the everyday of being presumed to be, as you mentioned earlier, being oppressed or being, managed by your a man in your family. So what I've tried to show you through this particular research and just the 3 case studies is that raising the future generation, I guess it's really, really important, whether you're a mother or not, is to be very aware of how, once you step into the public sphere and the public space, how you are perceived, how you are treated, and how these various things come together when you're applying for a job, when you're at an airport just waiting to pick up your mum, or if, you want to go on a holiday and you want to drive into France, and how you could potentially be stopped and searched at the port and be questioned, So all these things make the Muslim identity, whether male or female, so precarious, because wherever you go, wherever you are, you're going to have to be always ready to fight, because I feel like Muslims are always in the, you have the fight or the flight mode. I always feel like Muslims, I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is the fight mode is the one we always quickly have to instigate because it's self-defense. So raising the future generation, and which is what my parents have had to do because I'm the 9/11 generation. I was a kid when 9/11 happened. So I would say, is that what my parents did with me is that continuously remind me that, you do not let go of, how we've raised you. You do not have to stop being or acquiescing or making it, comfortable for people. Don't make your identity palatable for people. If you need to pray at work, go and pray. Make that something that you negotiate with your line manager. Don't make yourself palatable. If you don't want to go to the pub for the after drinks, don't go to the pub. And also the assumption that you will go to the pub because you don't wear hijab is also something that happens a lot. So so you're gonna constantly have to negotiate these things. But all I will say is what I've been passed down from my parents and grandparents is that don't make it comfortable. Don't make other people comfortable. You're not here to make people comfortable. We're here to be strangers and to hold on to our faith. So I guess that's what I wanted to share with you. And thank you very much for listening, everyone. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, Fatima. That was It was very inspiring, very informative talk. It's right that we think that women face the majority of Islamophobia, but we do face that on a regular basis. But from the stories you just said, I think men face it on a far different level, and it's absolutely scary. May Allah give sabr to these brothers and sisters who are having to go through this ordeal. Allow me to welcome our last, but definitely not the least, panelist, Dr. Mahera Ruby. With a PhD from Goldsmiths, University of London, Dr. Mahera focuses on intergenerational learning in families who originates from Bangladesh. She has spent the best part of her voluntary and professional life talking and listening to people from all walks of life. Dr. Ruby was the chair of Muslimat UK between 2006 and 2012. She has co-authored a book titled Interconnecting Worlds, Teacher Partnerships for Bilingual Learning, and Family Jigsaws, Grandmothers as the Missing Piece Shaping Bilingual Children's Learner Identities. Dr. Ruby founded Blooming Parenting in 2014 and will speak to us about contemporary parenting challenges and Muslim mothers in the UK.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum everybody. Jazakallah khair to the organizers for inviting such a wonderful range of speakers to the event, and it's a privilege sharing a platform with these esteemed sisters, mashallah. So I'm a mother of 3 boys, mashallah, and after listening to the prevent strategy and the case studies now, I just want to get a feel for mothers in the room first. What does the future look like? Or actually feel like? We'll look at the look like in a minute, but what does the future actually feel like at the moment, listening to this so far? Scary. What do you feel like doing to your children? Sorry? Taking them away to a safer place. I'd like to know where that is. Also, hiding them away. So it's a bit of it's a fearful future, a future wrapped in fear. How many young people are in the room? Can I just have a show of hands? Oh, what's the definition? Thank you. Why are you not putting your hands up? The choice was out there. Younger. What I consider to be young, now you take that definition where you want to. How do you feel about the future after listening to what you've just listened to? Scary. Oh, let's define younger as being younger than me, yeah? I'm 48. So how do you feel about the future? Come on, your voices are very low. Are you feeling scared as well? Okay. So if our future's kind of scary and it's wrapped in fear, that takes a type of parenting that we need to prepare for. But if your future's full of hope and opportunity that the world claims that they can give us, if you're not of color, possibly, then that takes another type of parenting. So it's either colonial parenting or decolonizing parenting. Again, you can look at how you want to look at parenting. But actually to raise a future generation, and I'm going to speak from a parenting perspective, I guess, is actually to sort out our mindset. It is a perspective that we need to deal with, because we are going through a constant state of fear. And that fear isn't just around the stories that we've heard, because after you hear these stories, you go home, alhamdulillah, you think that your children are safe and you move on, because it might happen to somebody else's child, not necessarily to your own. Yeah, that's what we think, not to my husband, not to my child. But the back of our mind, there is a constant fear of being at the wrong place at the wrong time, being stabbed, being hijab pulled off, criticized, ridiculed, all of those things that we fear. But actually, if you think about perspective and mindset, it's an interesting word, because changing and dealing with your perspective is actually to have the ability to hold two visions in place. Okay? So what do those two pictures look like in your mind? One should be, where are you now? Yeah? And the other should be, where would you like to be? Right? So that's looking to the future. So where are you now, and where would you like to be? And between these two pictures, there's a tension, normally. Because we know the information, we all have the knowledge of what we would like to see. Often we struggle with how we should get there. What are the tools, what are the strategies we need to be able to cross this bridge of hope that we see at the other end? Yeah? We don't want these labels of radicalization. We don't want our sons and daughters to be stopped and searched and being radicalized through that process. Oftentimes, yeah? So actually, what are those tools and strategies we need to move to the future? And we're in no shortage of knowledge, alhamdulillah. You know, my mom used to say, alhamdulillah, you know, as people of deen, especially in this room, we are kind of preaching to the converted to a certain degree, yeah? So we have the knowledge. It's actually being able to use it at the right time, at the right place, that is what is important. We shout at our children and cry after because we wish that we didn't shout, yeah? And we know we shouldn't have shouted, but we still did. So it's actually knowing in that moment that, you know, what is better for me is to withhold my tongue and not shout, and then I will feel better for it in the future. So to be able to have that future in front of you as much as possible to motivate you where you are sitting at the moment. And that's what we need to look at in terms of perspective. So one of the things about knowledge is actually, knowledge is a set of information that we have processed and we feel wiser. But actually wisdom doesn't come from knowledge. Wisdom comes from the action you take from the knowledge that you have. And through practicing that knowledge and the challenges and the mistakes that we make gives us the wisdom that we can look back on and say that, alhamdulillah, I know better how to deal with this. So I had a 4-year-old, by the way, alhamdulillah, I'm a grandmother. So alhamdulillah, share this joy with me. So I had a 4-year-old niece who came to see her niece, right? So my niece is my granddaughter's niece. So she came with gifts, and so one was a baby bouncer, and it's in a box. So my daughter-in-law was saying to her, so, you know, Jannah, how does this work? How does this bouncer work? And so my daughter-in-law is a teacher as well. And so my niece was saying, well, I know because I played with the one my cousin had, and I remember pressing buttons, and it did this and it did that. This one looks similar. So where did her wisdom come from? It's experiential learning. Yep, so she knows that. And immediately we both looked at each other. We said, this is experiential learning. And this is what we need to do for, you know, what's my daughter? Nusayba. You can see I'm still new at this game. So it's by doing, yeah, by practice, that my niece was able to gain her knowledge and be able to use it as wisdom to pass it on to somebody else. Yet we assume sending our children to madrasa, sending our children to holiday schemes, sending our children to all these places of knowledge, and we are, those of our mothers whose children are in this room now, are hoping they are listening, yeah, because you can learn something, I hope, right? So we always hope that somehow, just through the ears, that they will somehow transform this information into amazing action of being great people. Where do they practice it? Where does the word courage come from? Courage comes from the ability to have lots of opportunities to practice, which you gain your confidence from. So we are not allowing mistakes to happen. We are not allowing our children to take those managed risks where they can have those experiences and come back and say they think they've made a mistake. We know it was kind of a managed risk, yeah? And come back and be able to say, you know, I know better for it. I am better for it. I am more knowledgeable for it. And also I'm more prepared for what may come. So being able to do things is so important with the knowledge that we're giving them. And today I just want to ask you that the wonderful hadith we always like to use in parenting is about the one from Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who says, up until the age of 7, we play with our children. From 7 to 14, what do? Tarbiyah, so we teach our children. From 14 plus, we be their friends, companions, yeah? How many of us feel like we're companions to our teenagers? Sorry, teenagers. It's a bit of a them and us. Ends up being that kind of a situation where it's very much about them challenging us. Now let me turn that into a practical visualization for you. Up until the age of 7, where do you tend to find you and your children? In front of you, behind you, with you? Where do you tend to be playing with them? With them in front of you. You'd like to see them safe, right? So they're in front of you, knee to knee, you know, on the floor, but if you're outside, they're in front of you, they're running along at a safe distance in front of you. 7 to 14, where do you tend to see your children? Sorry? Xbox. Normally behind your back. Yeah, not with your permission. So behind your back. So when they're walking on the street with you, they also tend to like to stay behind your back, you know, behind. Why? They don't want you to pick on them, but actually they're observing you. That's when they come and say to you, but you haven't prayed. Why are you asking me to pray on time? If your cooking is as important as my Xbox, then we both can pray a bit late. Yeah? So they start to nitpick as much as we nitpick with their behavior. From the age of 14, where do they like to be? Front of you. They still like to be behind you, unfortunately, in this context. But in their minds and in their hearts, and when I speak to young people, they like to be next to you. They want to be treated as adults. They want to be treated somebody whose views count, who want to be consulted, yeah? Yet we still want them to be behind us or in front of us. We still don't trust them. And today, interestingly, I was observing the audience, and this is no judgment on this audience at all, but yet young people are sitting at the back, where we are still gaining knowledge upon knowledge upon knowledge as parents, but our young people are at the back, maybe catching up, serving you, mashallah, yeah? So they are putting some of that knowledge into practice, but yet, if we want to raise a future generation, we should trust them enough to be at the front and to be able to lead us with the technology. We only do that when we have our mobiles and they don't work. Honey, can you sort out my phone? My, laptop's not coming on. Can you see what happened to the TV? So we rely on them on technology, but actually we're not relying on them for the amazing knowledge that they might have, the creativity, the nuanced understanding of the community that they have that we don't have, because we are seeing it from the outside. I don't go into the school as a parent. I still receive them on the outside. 6 hours, I don't know what they've been up to, unless they tell me. Yeah. So again, I'd ask you to reflect on what kind of relationship do you have with your children in order to raise the future generation. We are also the future generation of our parents, right? We are sitting in the 21st century, where our parents, first generation, came in the early part of the century, some parts of the century. But actually, have we fulfilled our parents' dreams? Do we look back at our parents and think, why didn't you do more? Yeah? Yet they have built institutions like these, where we're sitting. They have built mosque and madrasas. Yet what is happening in those mosque and madrasas? Is it up to us to change it for the future generation? Or is it still going to be the 5 to 7 madrasas that we see that will continue for another generation? Is it feeding our children? Is it doing what it should do for the current generation that we are raising? And I'd like you to think about those, as we are all leaders in this community. Each parent is a leader, as we are reminded that we are a shepherd of the flock that we take care of. So in order to look forward to raising the future generation, I have a few suggestions, inshallah. And these suggestions have probably already been looked at, and I know as part of the community and so-called part of the community leadership, we're always banging our heads against the wall. What can we do? Why are we not engaging the young people? Why are we not doing what, why are they not interested in the organizations that we built? Yet we don't have a youth club in any mosque that I know. Yet we don't have a lounge where kids can come and sit there, wait for their friends to come from the local school and meet up and then go home together. We haven't got those. We are raising funds more and more for more mosque and prayer space, where it tend to be the elderly that come and the young people sneak in and they sneak back out. So in order to raise a generation for the future generation, there's 4 steps that I think we need to actually look at. What sort of knowledge are we investing in? Yeah. Is Islamic knowledge tied to Quran classes, halakas, and what's the nature of our halakas? Who decides the topic? Who decides how important it is? Recently I asked a local youth group to show me their syllabus. It had on there, starting from the fire of hell, Judgment Day, whole blocks of things that our young people should know. Do you think they don't know that already? Do you not think they already think about how hot the fire of hell is? Or they stopped thinking about it because we've thought so much about it for them, right? So again, what sort of knowledge are we giving to them about our deen, the society that they live in? Are we creating a fear culture of them and us all the time? Are we creating a culture where their knowledge can contribute in specialisms? I'm at a university, a couple of universities in London, and it breaks my heart that after graduate level, we don't see many Muslims in postgraduate level. We don't see people specializing as much as they should. We are happy with the graduation and 9-to-5 jobs that we have. Alhamdulillah, it's a source of income and halal, and that's not the point. The point is, what are we contributing to the society that we live in the current? Can society do without us? Should it be able to do without us? Is a question we need to ask. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already says to us, you are the best nation produced as an example for mankind. Can we be called an example in current times? You enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong and believe in Allah. Are we teaching our children how to do that? We shout it enough. You should know what is right and what is wrong, but are we giving them the strategies and the tools how to do that? So first of all, knowledge. Again, evaluating the knowledge that we are sharing with our future generation, the current generation that will inshallah become the future generation. Are we enabling enough opportunities? The next step is for them to rise to action. Yeah? And today, we're here with Strive UK. Part of action is to strive. The perseverance, the resilience our children require to be able to survive in the society that we're living in. So what sort of actions are you asking your children to rise to? Is there a street lamp that's affecting everybody on this street, not just Muslims? Can we together go and change the darkness on that street so that the whole community can be happy about it? Or are we just interested in what affects the mosque? Are we just interested in what affects our evening madrasa? So think about where our actions are and who is it supposed to affect and impact. So again, we are given guidance in the Quran, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with the verse, O you who believe, stand firmly for justice. Does it say for Muslim or non-Muslim? No, it says for justice. So stand firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even if it's against yourselves. And that's how deep this sense of justice is. Or your parents, or your relatives. And whether it be against rich or poor, for Allah can be the best protector of both. And then the verse continues. So follow not your hearts, lest you swerve. And if you distort justice or decline to do justice, verily Allah will be well acquainted with all that you do. And that sense of justice actually begins at home. When siblings fight, whose side do you take? Who's the normal one that always tends to get blamed? I'll leave that to you. So, mums in the room, please do justice, and justice begins at home as well. And that's where they learn the sense of justice within the home as well. So this action should give rise to change. And we expect change to happen within the individuals. As we know in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, change will not come, change the condition of the people until they change what is in themselves. So change is what is, so when people come to the parenting courses that I deliver, often the change comes from the parent first, and then they see the change in the home. So we need to think, where is the change going to happen first? So if we want our children to be the future generation that's dynamic, we need to become a bit more dynamic ourselves. We need to be aware of what's happening on our doorsteps and rise to action before we can show our children, this is the change I was involved in. Like the sister mentioned, mothers being the role models. We need to be the role models our children want to look up to and not hide away from. So the last, and we're out of time, the last is that with all these 3 steps, naturally, we should be leaving a legacy behind, right? Change means legacy. So can we today think individually, what is that one legacy I would like to leave behind? And that legacy you will not be able to leave behind on your own. You will need a team and a community to be able to make it a legacy. You can't leave a legacy unless somebody talks about it or someone is impacted by it. So we need people around us. And we know that our deeds come to an end except continuous charity, knowledge by which people derive benefit, and pious children that we leave behind. And inshallah, these will be the generation of the future. So this servitude leadership style that we're talking about, and I'm sure you're going to get that in the next panel, has to be wrapped around with the natural nature that we have of curiosity. Our children are naturally curious. Let them jump in that puddle. I wish I did that when my children were younger. But also enable them to, you should create an environment in the home where our children can discuss the complexity of life. Homosexuality, gender fluidity, boyfriends, girlfriends, that's discussion of the old now. But that doesn't bother us as much as it used to bother us. It's more important things we need to talk about. Sometimes now parents say, I'd rather my child has a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It gives me comfort, considering the conversations I might need to have now. So times are changing and it's becoming more and more complex. Our children need to filter those ideas somewhere, and we need to be their safe filters as much as possible, inshallah. So within that servitude leadership, we need to create that space in the home. And I just want to end with being a flight attendant. That in life, we actually look for 3 things, all of us. We look for direction. We look for companionship. This is what stewardesses do, right? The door's here, and the door's at the back. So we look for direction, we look for connection, and we look for belonging, right? Why do I put belonging there? Where we begin, where we come from, where we are rooted, So when you think about even the flight attendant, what is she or he showing you actually? What is it in a metaphorical sense? God forbid accidents don't happen, but when they do, what are they showing you? Emergency exits when you're in fire, in trouble, and which we are in, right? As a community, we are scared, we are fearful, as I started. But what kind of direction do we need? We need to talk with the young people and find that direction together. These are windows of opportunity. Unless we allow them to make some safe mistakes, we won't be able to show them the direction. Connection, again, their friends are more important than us. Accept that. Guide it. Support it. You might win 10 other children on your platform rather than losing your own and them. So embrace their connections that they have and try to nurture that connections that they build, and that will strengthen your connection with them. And lastly, the belonging. I'd like to ask you as a last question, what makes you or gives you a sense of belonging? Knowing that other people are like you, maybe commit a similar faith, gender, but most importantly, it's the connection and the love that creates the belonging. Somewhere you want to come to, the safety. So something safe, something nurturing, and something where, or somewhere where you can go and really talk your heart out will give you a sense of belonging. So I just want to end with that if we can create a community, any space that we go to, and you can sort out, is there a sense of direction in this place? The Qibla. What is our Qibla actually? What is our Qibla in our home, in our masjids, what's our communication going to be like? What are the type of connections we want to build? And what kind of a belonging do you want them to pride in? That will help us to raise the next generation, the future generation, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Mahera. That was a very engaging session, and I'm sure all of us mothers, future mothers, can all benefit from that. Inshallah, we'll transform our knowledge into action. Thank you. Now, we've now come to the end of our panel 2. What awaits is now a 10-minute Q&A as promised. So if you have any lingering questions, any comments, want to share any experiences, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, panelists, for such wonderful insight. I just want to know that you have been telling Sister Mahera that we have to approach our children and tell them where can we actually gather them, because I feel that the issue is with education. I feel when I teach in higher education, I feel that the BME, which Sister Rashida was saying, there is a big issue there. There is a huge gap between the white students. Because I saw the statistics, the white students at the BME. So there's a huge gap there. How do we change that? And I think education is something really important to even let them, because I heard those case studies, very interesting. Very heartening, very difficult to hear them, but something I didn't know, but now I know them. But how do we tackle that? How do we tell our children? Or is it not the education? Because that's what I think it is pretty important.
Would you like me to address?
Yes, please.
Okay. So what I would say is that as a community, we are doing fantastically well supporting our children in education. Tutors to 11 plus, to private schools. We will sell our gold. We will do everything to get our children through the education system. What I find is that when I work with the young people, so currently I run a study circle for university students who are involved in ISOCs, Islamic societies. And they're part of the Russell Group. Yeah. So here you have young people who are doing the best subjects at the best universities, medics, engineers, you name it, they're in that group. Yet one of the things, and I don't talk about academia to them at all. What I found with this group, and I've been meeting with them for over a year and a half, and we still haven't gone through what it means for self-esteem. They want to talk about feelings every week, how they feel. And one of the things I've noticed in that group is at least 10% of that group has been diagnosed with mental health. 10%. So I meet about 20, 25, 30 girls on a fortnightly basis. And that number is diagnosed with mental health. So when I spoke to them about it, where is the root of this mental health? Please don't take this personally or take offense from it, but it's in the home. Because they have never felt good enough. These girls are at the height of their academia. So you don't have to worry about their academia, sisters, please, as mums. What you have to worry about is the emotional connection that they don't have. They don't have the sense of worth. They are suffering from a sense of they're grieving the loss of love and the attachment they feel, not only in their families, but in their community. There's a sense that if they don't wear their hijab in a particular way, they won't be accepted in a particular circle. If they don't wear niqab, they won't be in a particular state. If they don't wear jilbab, they will be ridiculed somewhere else. As soon as we see a young girl with hijab, I know I belong to a community organization, we will say, we need to target that sister. She's already changed. She's already road to success, mashallah. What about all the other girls that are self-harming, multiple pregnancies? And I'm not trying to scare you, but that's the reality of our community. And it's our daughters being impregnated by our boys. They don't have to go far. So these girls are just an example to you that they could be at the top university, will come out as doctors that will treat you, but are suffering from mental health because they never felt good enough at home and in their community. So that's a course and a sort of a conference on its own, I think. But immediately, I'd like you to think in your home, do your children feel connected? Do your children feel a sense of belonging? Are you applying the same rules you were applying to them as a 7-year-old to a 17-year-old? Are the rules still the same? Or have you changed the rules because they're an adult now and I like to hear your view? Let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. What should our family rules be? Because 7-year-olds couldn't make it. They are capable, actually, but we don't think they are. How comes in schools they can do all of that and at home they can't? They can't lift their socks and put it in the laundry basket and mums are running around all the children at home. So again, you need to assess your home in a way that what kind of a home do I have? Are my children coming to me for direction, for advice? Why is it that they're not coming? Is it because immediately I scream at them and say, why did you do that wrong? That was very sinful. You should have known better. You've been raised in a good home. Yeah? Or do you say, Baba, that's fine. That's good. Let's talk about it. This is an opportunity to teach rather than to correct. Yeah? And I always give a motto to parents. Please, if you have an opportunity to correct your child, stop. Connect first. Once you have the connection, then try to correct. If you don't have the connection, you don't have the right to correct. They will not accept it. Jazakallah khair.
One thing, I as a lecturer, when I have my office hours or when I'm seeing my dissertation students, sometimes they don't come into the office to talk to me about the dissertation. They don't come to talk to me about, I don't know, the module or if they're struggling. They're usually sat in my office talking to me about problems with their parents. So I feel like I'm not a lecturer sometimes. I'm providing more pastoral care. I'm providing more pastoral care than I am my actual expertise on the subject area. So I have young 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds who come to my office and they want to tell me that their mother has done this to them or spoke to them in this way, their father did this, their father was not home last night, they don't know where their father is, or the older brother is acting like he's the head of the household now, so the sister doesn't know what to do. So, so conversations I have in my office with my students, which should be about their work, and as their supervisor, I should guide them in the dissertation, but it ends up being pastoral discussion about their family. And it's quite heartbreaking because as a lecturer, I can't intervene in someone else's family affairs, and I usually just sit there and listen because also I don't specialize in, family matters to give advice. So I usually just listen and then I just say, and then I just ask them, is this impacting your work? And then if it is, then I tell them to go to welfare services within the students' union or find people within the university who are qualified to guide them. And if they're being harmed, of course, then there needs to be police intervention, because but that's what I find. A lot of other friends who are lecturers, a lot of the times that is all we do during our office hours is provide pastoral care because no one listens to them. So they turn up to the lectures, they turn up to the seminars, they do the work, but then they come to your office and that's what they're talking to you about. And it gets really awkward because sometimes, they give you a lot of details about their families, and especially when you're from the Muslim community, it doesn't take too long to figure out who the family is connected to, and then you think, oh God, I've been at weddings with this family, So it gets really awkward, when you're a Muslim academic and then people's families are connected to this family from there. You turn up to weddings and you see them there and you're like, oh, well, your son was in my office the other day. So then you end up finding out about people's family affairs at home and what's happening and the affairs and the alcoholism. My God, the alcoholism that so many young Muslim kids come in with about their relatives. But one thing I do recommend, which is something I encourage people to do, is if you're at university, you want to get politically active about the things I've discussed, then definitely get involved with the unions. The Students' Union and whatever the union is on your campus, which is usually UCU, University of College Union. Get involved with them. So if you ever, as a Muslim student, find yourself in a situation with a lecturer or professor about Prevent, about Islamophobia, about being referred to someone, I always tell Muslim students, don't you ever go into a meeting without there being a paper trail. Make sure there has been an email exchange with whoever you're about to see, that you are going to see them. Because if you turn up to a meeting and there hasn't been a paper trail, it will be your word against our professors. You know? So I always tell students this, especially to do with this kind of stuff that happens and this happens often to Muslim students who find themselves in awkward situations with professors who've been Islamophobic or see them as a suspect or feel there's something potentially going wrong there. So get involved with the union, the Students' Union, the University College Union, and make sure you're protected. Always keep a paper trail. Do not ever turn up to a meeting without there being an email confirmation that you're having that meeting. And then even after the meeting, send another email saying, following our meeting where we discuss this, you know, and CC in people you need to CC in. So I always tell Muslim students and students of color in particular, protect yourself, because when the institution comes for you, they will come on you harder than they will on the white students. So that would be my advice to, if you have grown adult children at university. But yeah, otherwise I agree with what Mahera said, yeah.
Okay, now because of time, I'm going to take this last question and then we're going to move on. But the panelists will be around if anyone has any other questions.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for your talks. I've got a question for Fatima, but the panel in general. You must have all had some sort of experience with young women or women who've experienced mental health or any kind of trauma. How have you felt they've expressed their kind of relation with Islam when it comes to mental health? And what sort of kind of barriers do you feel there are present at the moment in our society that we need to overcome? I'm aware that there's stigma and taboos and people think it's jinn possession and things like that, but if you could give your own personal insight, that would be great. Thank you.
Actually, just last week, I met up with 2 students from King's College London who work on, who are doing a degree on global health, and both of them wear hijab. One of them wears it in a turban fashion, and another wears it normally, you know, sort of round with a pin. And both of them were asking me how to pursue a PhD. So it was a conversation about career service, career access. So we had a whole conversation. You keep nodding. Do you happen to know who I'm talking about?
Oh, I went to King's and I also want to pursue a PhD, inshallah.
Okay. Because you're nodding, so I'm thinking, oh my God, do you know what I'm talking about?
I may know, but we'll catch up after.
So both of them, they said to me, you know, they're doing their global health degree, then they want to go and do a master's, and then they want to do a PhD. So I explained to them what it is they need to do, the grades they need to get, where they can go to access their degree that they want to do. And then one of the young women in the turban hijab just said to me, but how do you deal with your family? You know, because my mum doesn't understand that I actually I'm going through depression, and my mum is just on my case to get married. And the other young woman said the same thing. She said to me, you know, it's hard, you know. In the other young woman's case, she has an older sister who still isn't married. So she's like, in a way, I have a block. My sister is my block. But the other young woman, she doesn't have a block. You know, she is the eldest. So what I find with young Muslim women and mental health, from my experience of speaking to them about something as simple as career advice, when they want to ask me, where do I get the scholarships, the bursaries, the conversation then turns into, but what do I do with my family? My mum is on my case. And it's almost always, and I'm sorry to say this, it's almost always a female relative who's pestering that female relative to get married. It's actually very rarely a father or a brother or a cousin, male cousin. So this young woman said, my mum doesn't understand that I'm going through depression. She thinks I'm putting it on because I want to pursue my studies. So her mum sees it as, you know, it's a performance she's putting on. And then her mum is basically bringing her all these proposals to the house when she doesn't want to meet these people. So she sometimes turns up to the living room and there's a family with a son there, and she's like, I have to turn up in a nice shalwar kameez and talk to them now to keep up, respectability politics. So a lot of young women I speak to, their mental health is related to the pestering they get from their family for marriage and the constant inducing of fear. But okay, you're almost 25. Remember, 25 is the when you expire. And then when I speak to women who are older than that, when they hit 30, they're like, well, I'm post expired now. I mean, we're laughing here, but these are things that are impacting these young women and being forced. I don't know if I've answered your question, but young Muslim women, what can they do? Connection is another thing. It goes back to connection. Like, sit down with your mothers or your female relatives and tell them, just please back off. Like, when I'm ready, I will come to you and I will get married.
On the other hand, you have a talk on marriage and the room is full. Yeah. And you have a talk on taqwa and there's 3 people. So there's a struggle. There's a real struggle with a particular generation of young people going through college, university, that we don't have enough guidance in the community of how to navigate that space. So either they don't want to come forward across as being too forward, or there are some that wants to do things, but they're scared of marriage because it will block it. So this healthy notion of marriage isn't being sold correctly, especially for women in our community. And like Fatima said, I personally feel it's women doing it to other women. We are the women raising the future women and men. So can we get it right? Sort of. Can we raise our boys to become better fathers and husbands? Can we raise our girls to be not so fearful of marriage, where we want to protect them and so much that they haven't got any life skills that they can go into a marriage with? So again, academia will come if you have the connection and the belonging and the direction. Academia will come. I can say that with my eyes closed. Don't worry about academia like we do. Spend a bit more money on connection. And inshallah, everything should fall into place, sort of.
Thank you for the questions, and thank you, dear panelists. It's been a pleasure listening to you all. To show our token of appreciation to our speakers, we'd like to invite Sister Suhana, representing LUMMA, Luton Malayali Muslim Association, to hand over mementos.
Can I just say I'm from Luton? Who's from Luton? You're from Luton? Oh, did you say Luton?
Yeah, they represent a...
Oh,
yeah,
you're from
she's
Luton
actually
before.
Luton,
Okay,
yeah.
representing.
But I think there are many from Luton here.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh,
There you go.
Oh, feel at home now.
Yeah, you can start, yeah. Sister Mahera. Oh, and yeah. Sister Fatima.
Thank you so much.
Sister Rashida. Sister Claudia. Thank you, Suhana. Thank you, panelists, once again.